Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is October 29th, Friday, 2021, and I once again have some free time today. It's been a wonderful blessing, actually. This storm that we got hit with has really left me with some extra time to be able to communicate with the audience, so I'm taking that opportunity, and I'm really loving it. So I'm taking you folks on another coffee chat, and coming fresh off of a conversation, a really excellent conversation last night with Atlas. I just posted that to my channel a little while ago. Hopefully, folks will enjoy that. Atlas and I, we became friends after we did the first Patriot Roundtable, and ever since then, we've been getting to know one another. And it was the first time to sit down and actually have a conversation one-on-one. And we talked about a wide range of topics. So hopefully, folks will enjoy that. I think the conversation was about an hour and 45 minutes or something like that. We went for quite some time. It was really, really refreshing. And, you know, it had me, I was listening to a little bit of it this morning before I decided to record. And once again, just had me reflecting on how amazing it is to be connected with people like her. And, and so many folks out there in the audience, who have the same like-minded perspective on the world, and how refreshing it is to be able to just sit down and have a conversation with somebody and be able to go in so many different directions and have it all tie together and have it all ultimately be rooted in, the same topic that I've been discussing more and more lately, which is, this bringing light into the world, this embracing of our humanity and changing our attitudes really, away from cynicism and embracing love, embracing all of the emotions and all of the experiences that we were supposed to have, that we were designed and created to have as human beings, rather than pushing them away. And there are a lot of folks, like I say, who are going to be. I think the more that love gets ushered into the world, the more boldly people start to talk about it. You're going to see a lot of people's cynicism rise to the surface. To be honest with you, I've already seen some of it with some of the conversations that I've had, or some of the commentary, I should say, that I've done on this topic. I think a lot of people just kind of still look at it as, oh, that's just kissy talk or mushy talk, or they still have this attitude where they haven't quite yet got to the point of being able to identify the difference between the truth behind their emotions and what they really mean, and the lie that's been told to us about our humanity. And they're still, in essence, buying into the lie that the cabal created to define strength and weakness. And honestly, that type of reaction, I think a lot of people, it's intimidating to a lot of people, because, whenever they want to really reveal themselves, reveal their heart and soul, they're always, I think, intimidated by this idea, this cynicism that they can almost guarantee is going to surface in people when, they dare to actually reveal the truth about what they're feeling. And honestly, that, I think, at one point in my life, that was true for me. I definitely was preoccupied with the opinions of other people, specifically, with regard to me and who I really am. But I'm starting to realize now that I've been connected with so many amazing people that, quite honestly, people can react however they want to, and people are at wherever they are on this journey. And I'm sure a lot of the people out there who are still cynical toward these concepts, eventually, they're going to come around, because they're going to identify the truth. They're going to recognize the truth and what the truth has always been. And I'm going to continue to talk boldly about these topics that are on my heart. I mean, I feel blessed, that God is putting this message in my heart repeatedly and wanting me to spread positivity and joy and love into the world to the best of my ability. And yes, analyze where we are. Of course, we have to talk about all of the steps along the way. Don't get me wrong, but in the grand scheme of things, this concept, I think, is going to be embraced by people more and more as this new energy is introduced to the world, and the old energy is being phased out. And that's just a long, tedious process. Getting rid of all of this negative energy in the world, it's not an easy thing to do. And the place where we are right now is going to take, it's still, even after the big events happen, there's going to be a process that we're going to all have to undergo as humans, of coming together and learning how to live in the world that's right side up. And I've been talking about this a little bit, but inversion, this whole concept of inversion, really, when you think about it, because the cabal has been in control for such a long time, and because they can't really create anything new, they can't create anything original because they're disconnected from the source. They're disconnected from God, and God is the source of all things, all creativity, all love, all joy. The only thing that they can do, the only thing that the devil can do, is to invert God's creation, is to invert and pervert God's creation. That's that's his superpower. And does he do it very well? Absolutely. If he didn't, we wouldn't be in this situation. But nevertheless, we are connected to source. We are the ones who are God's children. We're the real source of creativity, the manifestation of God's love in the universe. And what the devil's done is he's taken our energy, he's taken our passion, he's taken all of our instincts and confused them. And this is, of course, as we know, especially those of us who are believers, this has been going on since creation, right from the get-go. And we're learning more and more about the stories, the real true history associated even with the stories that we know, the details that have been hidden from us. We're learning more and more and more. But the point here is that this has been going on for a very long time. This is a battle that a war that the devil has been waging against God, against God's creation. And God, because he allows all things, he allows all choices, decided to accept the devil's challenge. But this is always a foregone conclusion that we were going to come out on the other end of this struggle, that God would be victorious. But sometimes we sit back and we think about the end game, and we can very easily forget where we are in that process, and understanding that we're going to have to go through a pretty grueling realization process as a species. And I think that it's going to be assisted in various different ways. I mean, of course, we're talking about, what's going to be introduced into this world. This is another topic that I also love to continually remind people about and to talk about, is all of this amazing technology and all of these amazing gifts that are going to come into our lives in the form of, rejuvenating and restoring, repairing our health and our bodies. And not just our physical bodies and our physical health, but our mental health, our emotional well-being. Everything these med beds do is to recalibrate us to our original DNA blueprint. We've heard Gene talk about this. We've heard others talk about it. But what it does is it has our original genetic code. It identifies our original genetic code, and ultimately through high frequencies can repair all of our DNA and restore our physical bodies, and of course our emotional homeostasis, in essence, our spiritual grounding, our spiritual center. It can restore all of those things as we were created. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And that these gifts are going to be just raining down upon us in the form of med beds, in the form of financial freedom. I mean, I love to reflect on this topic because I think to myself, I wake up every single day. What are the things that are on my mind that rent space in my head? What are the causes of my stress, right? And of course, right up at the top of that list, obviously, should go without saying, is this war that's being waged against evil. Of course, that's been at the top of my priority list for a very long time, and more and more and more, it just asserts itself as the number one spot. But what else? I mean, of course, the same things that you're worried about, the same things that rent space in your head, probably your health, your body, and in all of its forms. I mean, we're living in this inverted world with this, and these magnetics that they've created, where we're just constantly in this negative loop, this negative frequency loop, and we could never break free of it. So that has a massive effect on our mental state, our emotional health. We struggle with this every single day. What else? Well, how about finances? How about money? Being able to pay the bills. I mean, for most people, this is what this is their daily existence. They're obviously thinking about and preoccupied with these things to such an extent. Not to say that these things aren't important, by the way. Of course they are. But the cabal system has, they've created this vice. I've talked about this, where there's just constant pressure on us. I mean, from a financial standpoint, just to be able to pay the bills, just to be able to keep our head above water. For a lot of people, that's really what it is. For most people, even, it's just paycheck to paycheck, keeping your head above water. It's a constant state of fear and uncertainty that they've created on purpose. So just right there, you take care of those two things. You address those two issues. When the world's right side up again, and everybody doesn't have to worry anymore and be constantly in fear about their health and all of these diseases, which, by the way, many of which have been created by the cabal. And boy, oh boy, wait until we find out all the disclosure on that. Wait until people find out about the putting the petroleum based creating the petroleum based medicine to cause cancer, and the entire system, the entire healthcare system as we know it. Wait until these truths come out about its history and how much of this has been engineered against us. Not to suggest that there aren't diseases that occur naturally and things along those lines, but just wait. Wait until we discover where all of these diseases that we thought were naturally occurring actually came from. And wait until we start hearing the names associated with. One of them, of course, is good old Dr. Fauci. And isn't it great now that everybody's paying attention to the dog comms? Doesn't the timing on that doesn't it just absolutely boggle the mind how amazing the timing is? And now, of course, I mean, it's mainstream news. I mean, I was reading an article in The Hill about what this demonic creature is doing to these innocent animals. I mean, locking their heads into place, locking them in there so that they couldn't move, and then having these insects basically just slowly eat away at their face. For what, you ask? Is there anything that would justify that other than pure evil? Is there anything at all? Is there any reason why that should ever happen? No. The answer is clearly no. I don't care what kind of knowledge you're seeking. There are certain things you simply do not do, and that is one of them. And this is awakening the conscience of people. But I know I drifted into that about Fauci. But getting back to what I was ultimately talking about here is that people are going to have these major, the biggest sources of stress that they've ever known. Everybody says, life, it's like that old saying, life's a bitch and then you die. Why? I mean, where did that saying come from? Well, it was designed to be that way, wasn't it? This entire system was designed to create stress, to lure us into the system while we're young, to indoctrinate us, of course, to propagandize us, to teach us what we should value, what we shouldn't, what we should chase after, what we shouldn't, before we're given any real responsibilities, and we're lured in with all of these false, empty promises about how we're going to find happiness and joy and fulfillment. I mean, and all it's really about is just these empty, hollow statuses. I mean, that's kind of what it's evolved into. Instead of getting any real fulfillment out of life, people are just chasing after some sort of thumbnail of what they think their life should look like, so that people can like it or comment on it, so that they can get their little dopamine boost, but never actually have any real connection with people. We've got a whole generation of kids now growing up. And I think to myself how horrific it is, what we've done to these children. That they're growing up, they're coming of age in a world where they can't even see anybody's face. And all these babies out there who don't even know, not even sure what their mother looks like. Because the mother's a psycho who has to wear the mask every second of her life. I mean, this is what we've done. And this is it was only the beginning of how bad this was ultimately going to get. I mean, this whole process of them taking us down, we didn't have Trump, we didn't have the alliance, we didn't have ultimately the military backing us, what they had planned for us, folks, I can't even begin to describe. But we were going to be locked down for years. And we were going to be facing boot on your face tyranny. And there was going to be nothing to stand in its way. I mean, that would have been, I mean, yes, ultimately it would have devolved into a civil war situation. If there was no plan, if there was no military on our side, then yeah, I mean, that's the direction that it would have gone. And quite frankly, it's anybody's guess how that would have looked, how that would have turned out. I mean, part of me feels like, there's no possible way that any standing army in the world could defeat the American people. I mean, I've said this many times. I mean, the American patriots, it's amazing because they're always trying to brand us as terrorists and violent, bloodthirsty criminals and all these things. And we haven't even shown up to the party. I mean, we haven't even begun to unleash the power of we the people. In fact, we've shown more restraint than any other entity really in the world in terms of actually using our physical power, physical force. I mean, and God forbid, I hope we never have to. But one thing I know is I know the passion and the spirit of the American people. And I know how people feel right now. It's like, it's almost like the metaphor of the spring. We've just been compressing that spring back and back and back and back and back and back and back for such a long time. And this entire time, people's anger, their rage, their righteous indignation has just been mounting and mounting and building and building. And God forbid if that ever is unleashed. And who knows? It may have to be. I don't know. I mean, my ultimate belief is in the plan, and I've said many, many times that I don't believe that I think that the plan was exactly to prevent that from happening. But in the event that I'm wrong, and this actually does occur, and this gets unleashed into, against the enemy, and we could define the enemy as anyone who stands in the way at that point of the American people taking back their country and taking back justice and just demanding and just being done. I mean, if that ever happens, folks, I don't think that, they would have to probably just drop nukes on all of us. Not that they wouldn't do that, but again, I don't even know how I got on that scenario there. I think really what I was getting at was, thank God that that there is a plan, because if there weren't, I think we'd be in some pretty dire straits, and we are in dire straits now. But compare it to what it would have looked like had there been no good guys, really, in high places. No good guys in charge of all the big guns, as 107 likes to put it. And we know that's true. I mean, we understand from the military side of things, really, the chain of command. We know who the real president is. We know who the commander in chief is, and who his secretary of defense is, where his loyalties lie, and where the loyalties lie of the 11 combatant commanders out there in the field, all over the world. All Trump appointees, all loyal patriots. And we already know the rank and file military, where they stand. And that's what keeping this whole charade in place. That's really what's propping up the country and preventing the country from completely going to hell during this devolution process. And I talked about this a little bit when I was getting into talking about the work of Patriot, putting this all together, this devolution, and helping us understand what this really means and how this was enacted and put in place, and showing all of the evidence, all of the puzzle pieces. I mean, just fit perfectly together. And the military is what is really behind the scenes. It's almost like the hidden hand right now that's holding up the system. While all of our administrative functions of our government and basically our entire society, as we're going to see, I believe, by the time it's all over, is just going to come apart at the seams. All by design. But we've got the military behind us. And that, in essence, is going to make all the difference. But the plan of the cabal, as we know, they were going to take us to war. They were going to have us in a nuclear type situation with Russia, China, God knows. But it was most likely, if Hillary got in there, it was supposed to be a nuclear war with Russia. And the elite they were just going to nuke the crap out of the entire planet and go underground. And we know what's underground, folks. If you've been doing your research, if you've been listening even remotely to my show, and mine's only one of so many, you know what's underneath the world, what's underneath the ground, excuse me. We're not just talking about we're not talking about bases, not just military bases that you've seen depicted in TV shows and movies and things like that. They have entire massive cities underground that actually mirror the atmosphere. They have a sun and a sky, and I'm told they have bodies of water. I mean, we're talking about some really, really next level stuff. That this is what they were going to do. They were going to completely kill off humanity, go underground until the world was habitable again, probably at least 100 years, and they were going to live underground. Now, and this is just a situation underground. This is to say nothing of what's happening in space. And there have been a lot of very interesting developments on that front. I'm actually probably going to do a report. I'm going to probably take people on a deep dive of some of the recent intel that's come out on that front from people like Elena Denon and Megan Rose. I'm going to put together a report just to kind of do an update there, because I know folks really enjoy hearing about that intel. But what's happening underneath the ground? I mean, this is still an ongoing process. There are still DUMBs that are being taken out. I mean, it's not been completed. And it's amazing that this has been going on for such a long time, and it's such an unbelievably, radically massive scale, and none of us ever had any idea. I remember I was watching the show Stranger Things. Sure, probably a lot of you have seen, and I think it was maybe the second season of the show. It may have been the third. I can't remember, but the whole premise of it was the kids in the show, they discovered an underground military base, a dumb, basically, by going into this elevator that was attached to the local mall. I don't remember the exact details. It's been a while since I've seen it, and I remember thinking to myself, this is the most outrageous thing I've ever seen in my life. You mean to tell me that they actually have these massive, deep underground military bases that can be hidden underneath something like a mall, a shopping mall? And by the way, the show takes place in the 80s. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, this is, the premise of this is just absolutely ludicrous. And this was only a couple of years ago. And that just goes to show you how much I've evolved in that period of time. From seeing something depicted on TV and thinking it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, because that's the way I was conditioned to think, like when I talked about Agent Buried Alive, I got into some detail on this topic. The whole idea behind science fiction is to convince us that it's everything, all of these truths about the universe and science itself, yes, but life, extraterrestrial life, or I should say non-terrestrial life, that all of this stuff, telepathy, teleportation, portals, was fiction. All of the entire intelligence community was dedicated. They had massive wings of it dedicated to this specific task of getting us to associate the truths about the universe and what's possible, and to keep us thinking that that's fiction so that they can keep us controlled inside of their little box. And I don't remember exactly when it was where I had that transformation where I no longer would see something like in Stranger Things and think to myself, well, that's the most insane thing I've ever heard, and actually started to realize that the more insane that it seems, the more likely it is that it's probably true, and there are probably just a few falsehoods mixed in with it to give it plausible deniability. But that's how they hide everything in plain sight. And I don't remember when it was exactly that I realized that. Maybe someday it'll come to me. But at a certain point, it just clicked in my brain. All of these things, from time travel to teleportation to telepathy, all of these psychic abilities, and all of the, from the X-Men to Back to the Future, shape-shifting and reptilians and different type beings and sectoids, all of these things are real. And here I was thinking, along with so many other people, my entire life, that this was just a figment of someone's imagination, a very, very vivid, amazing, creative force behind these things created them from their mind. Wow, that's truly amazing. But the truth is that, like I said, they only know how to invert and pervert and weaponize against humanity God's own creation. They didn't create any of this stuff. They were just privy to it and kept it a secret from us so that they could weaponize it against us. All of this knowledge, all of this discovery, all of these things on every single level, on talking about health, talking about energy, communication, transportation, the existence of life, all of these things, all of this knowledge, they put all of their people in all the right choke points and were able to keep it hidden for a very, very long time. I mean, it blows my mind when I think about, I mean, I just go back a couple of years in my own perspective and looking at things. And I would think to myself, if somebody mentioned, let's just say the 1890s or the 1880s, let's just say the 1890s, around the time of Tesla, the association I would have made in my mind is that basically everybody was still riding around in a horse and buggy, and everything was super, super primitive in terms of technology. And that we've advanced light years since then. And in a sense, I'd be right. But the more I've learned, the more I've come to discover that this technology, folks, anti-grav, time travel, teleportation, telepathy, I mean, these things go back to that era and even before that era. These technologies have existed. Free energy. And I've talked about a lot of these, I've talked a lot about Tesla, talked a lot about Jetson White's videos on him, which are amazing. But the point is that these technologies have existed for such a long time that we don't even begin to understand now. I mean, we're going to understand, but we're going to be introduced to technologies that we are truly going to be, it's going to be like light years. It almost reminds me of in the Star Trek, or was it Star Wars? I can't remember which one it was, but when they went light speed, I think it was Star Wars. Yeah, the Millennium Falcon. And they would put it in light speed, like all the lights would just kind of come flashing toward them as they shot off into space. I mean, that's kind of the way I see it metaphorically. I mean, that's what's going to happen to humanity. We have already been gifted and given by God through benevolent non-terrestrials who are helping us all of the blueprints to be able to completely not only save our species, but take our species to levels that we can't even begin to wrap our brains around at the current moment. I mean, Gene talks about how the elite, the cabal, live in an opulence that we can't even understand. And I firmly believe that. But the technology, which he also points out that we've been given by our friends upstairs, who I believe are, giving us this, I believe, again, it's all directed. And there are folks out there who are going to say that, any type of non-terrestrial beings are evil and demonic. There are going to be people who are going to cling to that. And that's fine. If that's your perspective, I'm not going to debate you on that. It's not mine. I believe very, very firmly that non-terrestrial life exists. I don't even think it's a question of opinion anymore, quite honestly. I mean, and I also believe, probably more importantly, as I've stated many times, that the existence of good and evil in every single walk of life and every faction of life, there is the existence of good and there is the existence of evil. And I believe that even in these groups, even in a lot of these non-terrestrial groups that we talk about, like let's just say the reptilians, for example, they get referenced most frequently, even though they're only one group out of God knows how many. But the immediate association, of course, for us, and rightly so, I think, at this point in time, based on what we know, is that, you hear the reptilians, we think immediately of these evil, demonic beings, creatures who have hijacked our world. And we would be correct. However, there are positive reptilian beings, just like insectoid creatures. It's hard to imagine. First of all, I think for some people, it's hard to imagine the, insectoid type creatures that basically are taller in form, physical form, than a human being, but are actually insect-like creatures that can communicate in similar ways as human beings. It's hard for some people to even imagine a creature like that existing. And if they do imagine a creature like that existing, immediately the association would be that would be an evil creature. But again, from my research, from what I'm told, again, there's always that there are many that are evil, but there are also those that are not. And our whole perspective on the universe is going to completely radically change. And there are going to be people who, are going to have that opinion that anything that's not human is automatically evil. But I think they're also going to be ultimately proven wrong. They're going to be introduced to the reality and the truth of what exists. I just think to myself how amazing it's going to be when that day comes. And I believe that, God has ordained all of this. I believe God is the source of all things. And that we have finally reached a point in our humanity, in our experience, after the after our experience in Atlantis, before, we learned our lesson. And we had higher density beings try to warn us that we needed to learn how to master the ego mind, because at that point in time, we studied that era. We were at such a higher density that nobody really even imagined or could consider the possibility of wronging another. But in some ways, we were like the dodo bird. We had no defense against evil when it finally came to invade our realm, which it did. And it took a long, long time for humanity to get to the point where we finally are now, where we're on the verge of this massive breakthrough, where we collectively understand what happened to us, who we really are, where we really came from, what we've been through, and why. And what a journey it's been. And I mean, in some ways, I think it feels like a curse to be alive right now because it's such a difficult, dark period that we're living through. I mean, previous generations, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, folks who passed away, let's just say within the past few decades, that how close they came to being a part of this themselves and never actually made it. Or even, I mean, heck, even people that, passed away very recently who were aware, at least at some level, and awake at some level, and knew what was happening in the world and the universe. But at the same time, you go back 20, 30 years, I mean, the world was a very, very different place, seemingly, than it is now. This awakening process has accelerated massively. It was really, I think, going at a snail's pace compared to where we are now. Everything is just in hyperdrive. And this happened the minute Trump came down that escalator and made himself a candidate for president and started making speeches and started speaking truth and common sense to the American people and showing where his allegiance was. The minute that started to happen, I think that's when we really shot off into the night in terms of the awakening of the American people. Because finally we had a leader. Finally we had someone who we could tell, even though of course, there are always people out there who are going to say, well, Trump's an elitist. He's really cabal. He's really this. He's really that. He's in on the whole thing. And I mean, I've heard so many things about Trump, none of which I believe, because everything that Trump has done has been contrary to their agenda. Other than the thing that goes in your arm. And that is a major sticking point for a lot of people, no pun intended. But I'm not going to get into that today because that's just a whole different conversation in and of itself. But finally, we had a leader who people could identify as someone who really cared about the American people, who was putting Americans first for once and not trying to sell us this bag of goods, to sell us this, this screw job, as Alex Jones likes to say. And, people got to the point where it was just one thing after, it was just one phony after another. And then along came Trump. And I think what Trump did inside the hearts of so many people is that he restored faith that there was a way out of this hellhole that we've been living in, of this trap. And finally, we had someone come forward who was in a position where he could actually challenge and win. He could challenge the system, the establishment. And I know so many people have, sing the praises of Trump, but when I think about it, it really is amazing what that man gave up. I mean, he had everything that anyone could ever want in terms of material goods, in terms of a lifestyle, in terms of notoriety. I mean, he gave all of that up to be the most demonized man in the world, the most targeted man in the world. It's not just that they've said bad things about Trump. They've been trying to kill Trump God knows how many times. I'm sure we'll probably find out someday how many assassination attempts he survived. And he knew going into all this, he knew full well what he was getting himself into and why he was doing it. He's a man of God. He's a God-fearing man. And people can say what they want about, sometimes I talk about being God-fearing. And I get comments like, well, why would you fear God? And, people have their own viewpoints, and I get that. Some people view God as, as being impossible, an entity that's impossible to fear. That's fine if that's your perspective. That's not mine. I tend to agree with 107 that, God in his anger, you would run to hell to get away from God in his anger. See, I believe that all of us and all of our emotions, that I've been talking a lot about lately, we're created. We can't ever forget that we're created in the image of God. And that's not just the physical image of God. We're created with the raw materials of God's character inside of us. And that is our emotions, our responses to what we experience in this world. And God's people, because he controls our hearts, we have God's righteousness encoded in our DNA, in our heart. That's why the system can never take us out. Maybe it could take our life, but it could never take our spirit, our soul. It could never remove our heart, the connection that our heart has to God. It could never do that. It's like in Braveheart where he says they can take our lives. They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. It's in the same way. And that's why we feel the way we do. That's why those words resonate with every single member of my audience. I know that every single one of you, you would rather die than live under tyranny. You'd pay the ultimate price willingly to secure freedom, not just for us, but for the future, for future generations. That's how this country was born, folks. Because of people who stood up against tyranny. That's who we are. That's where we come from. That's encoded in our genetic memory, our DNA that's being awakened now. You think it's a mistake that all of these people are driving around in their trucks with massive American flags waving? And then all these people are wearing their patriotism all over the world for everybody to see, draped all over them, all over their sleeves. They're wearing their hearts. You think it's a mistake? No. What's happening is the genetic memory is emerging. It's coming to the surface. People are understanding now what's at stake. They understand that their freedom is under attack. And they're summoning the spirits of their ancestors are coming to the surface. The people who fought for freedom. And we're doing the same way right now, of course, and we hope it'll stay this way, that the fight is digital. is informational. I mean, yes, it's also physical in so many ways, but not involving us. And we hope that it stays that way. But we have done an amazing, amazing service to humanity, and we've fought in a way that I think is completely unprecedented. You know, wars up until this point in history have always been fought primarily on a physical level, on a physical plane, on a three-dimensional plane, I think you might even say. And I think we're the first generation of warriors of this fifth dimensional informational warfare, this asymmetric warfare that enables all of us. The beauty of it is enables all of us who have the will to fight, to be able to fight on this digital battlefield. You know, we don't have to go through boot camp or basic training or learn how to fire a weapon. All we have to do is have the courage to speak the truth and not back down. And we've done that. And we're the first generation to do that amidst an environment where we were really against all odds. Against all odds, people of the world came together amidst a backdrop of the cabal trying to engineer our destruction of each other. We found a way to transcend that, to come together. What an amazing experience. What a special thing to be a part of. Okay, folks, hopefully you enjoyed this coffee chat this morning. I'm going to leave you here with the hopes that you did. Please let me know how you responded in the comments. As always, I love reading your comments, and thank you so much in advance for all of your kind words. So many of you have such beautiful souls, and I am hoping that one day in the future, hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be able to meet on a physical level. But until then, we'll continue to communicate as we do and continue to build this digital family and this special bond that we share with each other that I cherish more and more every single day. So thank you, all of you, for your support. Please support the channel in any way you can. Make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons and share the links with like-minded folks. Help me to expand the reach of the show, which you've been doing. Please accept my gratitude for everything. God bless. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Patriot out.